So my first question is, which protest did you attend?
So I attended. I live in Brooklyn, and I went back to Brooklyn uh, the last week of May.
Hmm.
And so I was at my first protest was the one in front of the Barclays Center
Okay.
in I believe was that Atlantic Avenue,
Hmm.
and my second one was in I believe Williamsburg,
Okay.
Brooklyn. As yeah, that's that literally the next day.
Hmm.
And I went to a protest when I came back from Brooklyn to Bridgeport.
Okay.
I went to in Fairfield, Connecticut, that was organized by high schoolers who are very passionate about it.
Hmm.
Um, and then I went to the Bridgeport one that happened sometime last week, and then that became a whole dilemma. Like, it became a week long protest because they decided to camp out in front of the Bridgeport police station. Um, and it was ran by an organization that was in Bridgeport. They were fighting against police brutality because of certain cases that happened with a family member.
Hmm.
The organizers were family members of the victim, but also other people who were engaged in Connecticut for you know they have their way of setting that up, but the main advocates was to fight for a specific child who was uh, brutally murdered by Bridgeport police, and a lot of other similar cases that happened within the last few years. So that's why that protest extended, because they wanted their demands met. They created 11 demands,
Hmm.
and after a week of camping out, they got five of those demands met, which is like crazy. But
Wow.
yeah, so I try to help out with that as much as possible. I wasn't one of the people who camped out.
Hmm.
I was at least once a day just coming in to see how things were.
Hmm.
A friend of mine who I went to school with was actually one of the main organizers of it, so I was just kind of checking up on her and kind of being her quick therapy session because I couldn't stay uh, as much as other people were, but
Hmm.
I just tried to help in the little ways that I could. And then, yeah, that was my last one. And I think after that one, I was drained.
Yeah, activism, protesting is not easy,
And
especially if you are personally affected by it. Like it's how do you manage your mental health, but at the same time you want to fight for social justice. But about the Bridgeport protests, what were the demands that were met? Like, were certain officers fired or anything like that?
I can't give it to you off the bat.
Okay.
Um, I could even look it up on Instagram real quick because I did share it.
Oh,
Um, but the demands overall, um, I would have to look it up. I can tell you, just give me a quick moment.
okay, no problem.
But yeah, they were pretty. They, it wasn't like it was very well organized. They had a certain way of going about it, and they really did their homework and made and requested demands that they feel like would directly start to move things in the right direction. So I got it right here. So one of the first demands was this post. It says, "Is hereby resolved by the City Council of the City of Bridgeport, with the support and cooperation of Mayor Ganem. They're officially announcing that they're committing to the following police reforms." So it hasn't happened yet. They just verbally stated that they're committing to them. So one of them is the divestment from funding of the Bridgeport Police Department that addresses the safety, security, educational, and social service needs of residents of Bridgeport. Two is they're going to write an ordinance creating a citizens advisory board with oversight and adversary authority over disciplinary matters, practices, and procedures within the Bridgeport Police Department. They're gonna start packing down on certain things that certain structures that are already in play, and make it a little more add to the requirements of certain training regimens that they have. That's basically what that means. And then the right of three is write a resolution calling for the removal of SROs from the Bridgeport school system. I actually don't know what SROs are.
I think it stands for like I want to say like security resource officer or something like that, but a school resource officer.
Yes, okay, yes, that does make sense because from conversations they were very passionate about over policing in Bridgeport schools. So that would
Mhm.
make sense.
Okay.
Uh, for call for the immediate elimination of any gang databases maintained by Bridgeport Police Department. That was a big one because a lot of kids are already kind of like being criminalized when they have when a record is already built on them.
Hmm.
The only difference is that it has no filter whether they were a minority or not. So it's like if they were suspected of any like types of gang related activity, then Bridgeport Police had a database for that. And so it's like these kids are already basically, and if you get put on that, they're building a criminal. I can't say it right now.
That's okay.
They're building a criminal record
Mhm.
prior to being an adult. So yeah, they said that they're gonna actually. That was a big one that they were uh, trying to get because again, the criminalization of youths.
Mhm.
And that was like a way of going about it without. I'm sure they had a purpose for it, but it just really it's not a super necessary thing, and it probably does more harm than good.
Yeah.
And then the final one, this is a long one, so bear with me.
Okay.
Oh no, I'm sorry. There's six. Six of the 11 were met. That was my mistake. So
Oh,
five is call for demilitarization of Bridgeport Police Department,
mhm.
in particular the elimination of armored vehicles belonging to the Bridgeport Police Department. They have a tank.
A
Why do
10.
they have a tank? We don't know why they have a tank.
Wow.
They were trying to get rid of their tank.
I'm not too surprised about that though, because I've been seeing a lot of that. Um, like more larger cities or like medium to large cities where they have extensive riot gear and military style tanks,
Exactly.
or it's like we're not this is not the apocalypse, and if something were like a terrorist attack or something like that were to happen, you'd probably call the National Guard, who should
Exactly.
be fit for that, not your local police.
Exactly. Yes. 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 Like that's a whole other branches should be a whole other branches like specialty. Like they're supposed to protect, serve and protect us, not to try to fight us.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, so a lot of people were really happy to hear that. Also because like throughout the week, people start to kind of build like their jokes and everyone just wanted to get rid of the tank. It was just kind of like a joke, like, why do they have a tank? Let's just get rid of the tank. You don't need a tank. So yeah, that was a great one. And then the last one is the long one.
Okay.
It says call for the passage of state legislative reforms that include modifying the conditions under which a police officer can legally use deadly force from times when it is quote unquote reasonable to when it is quote unquote necessary.
Mhm.
And then a note mandating that badge numbers and IDs be displayed on the top layer of any uniform worn by Connecticut law enforcement officers, creating an independent oversight board for the investigation and prosecution of police at the state level for all cases involving deadly use of force by a police officer, requiring officers to intervene in all cases in which they see a fellow officer engaging in any form of excessive use of force or misconduct, and then creating whistleblower prot. I don't know what that means.
Wait, what was the last clause you said? Creating.
Whistleblower prot, PROT, prot. Protocol.
Oh, okay, okay.
Protocol.
Creating whistleblower protocol.
I'm not sure what the term whistleblower is.
So it's a person. How do I like sum it up? Basically, a person, if they see something wrong they'll like sound the alarm. Like
Okay.
Edward Snowden would be considered like a whistleblower. Ooh, also can't talk to. So, um, what was the beginning of that clause again? Something creating whistleblower protocol.
Oh, it's just its own statement,
Um,
creating a protocol. That these are all under number 6.
Okay, so from what I'm understanding from that clause, that would mean that anyone who does speak out um, within the police department, sounding the alarm of abusive practices or things like that, that maybe they should be protected.
Mm, okay.
That could be what that means because I've been with right now I know the conversation is more moved to like defunding the police, but also systemic racism in general. But I've been seeing with the whole defund the police thing or abolishing police, which I know are two different things, but they've talked about how police officers have qualified immunity, and apparently that's like on the federal level. And God, I forget what the story is. Something about how either in the Supreme Court and Congress they said they wouldn't get rid of qualified immunity, which basically means it makes it a lot harder for police officers who abuse the law to get charged for any wrongdoing, and which is a big problem. So
Protection for them.
yeah, yeah, because it's like the main thing that people are upset about. If everybody else who does the exact same crime or worse can immediately go to prison, why should someone wearing a badge be any different?
Mhm.
You know?
Yes, for sure, for sure, for sure. And and I feel like, and this is something that I've always thought about.
Hmm.
It's the fact that when I see so many police, it's like I don't even see a police. I see a human being, and just knowing what I know about our communities, like the being a police is such a beneficial job that
Hmm.
it's people who want to have a job of that caliber. Like it's very enticing, and it's
Yeah.
very and it's very and it's very safe,
Hmm.
and police officers are very well taken care of. But
Yeah.
it's I feel like to a point where it's always been like that, but it's to a point where it's too much. There's too
Hmm.
much safety in their career path, and I know personally, and just from seeing it in a lot of the police officers' eyes of the protests I've gone into, it's like I don't see like a police officer. I don't see um, this version that people tend to depict of a
Hmm.
police officer, even though they are standing for what they stand for. But I see a person. I see a person who got a good job, who are they themselves are trying to make a living out of this world,
Hmm.
and you know, and they get a nice federal check,
Hmm.
and with that, I could see a lot of people being on the wrong end of things. I could see a lot of police just like being put in this middle ground where I think it's pretty obvious that not all police are bad,
Hmm.
but it's like, but this job is so good to me. But then it's like, but you have to admit that there's too much freedom in it,
Yeah. Yeah.
way too much freedom in it, way too much power, way too many things are excused for them,
Yeah.
and and that's what I liked about the organizers of this event. Like their demands weren't over the top. They were reasonable to the sense where they wanted to start, uh, like they wanted to hack the system at play and how everything is structured within the police department. And
Yeah.
they really did the research on that. And even when I first got there on the first day, and I was listening to the demands that they were explaining, because I didn't know the full story when I got to that protest. I thought it was more of a generic Black Lives Matter protest, but they actually had more to it. They had several cases of things that they were fighting for.
Hmm.
That family members themselves are family members of the victims. Like it was very well thought of, very well organized. And um, I just like the more I learned about it, the more I realized how strategic they were with it,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I agree with that because me personally, when I hear statements like "abolish the police,"
Hmm.
that doesn't seem reasonable. because at the end of the day, people need protection.
Mhm.
But like reform it, hell yeah,
Mhm.
that makes sense. I just went on a tangent. I'm sorry.
No, no, that's good. That's good. Like I said, I don't want this to be, like just a cut dry like interview because I mean, I realize myself, I talk better with people when
Okay.
it's on a more like conversation base. Like just talking in front of a camera or like I don't know, for some reason it doesn't click well with me. Um, but how is it different compared to the protest you went at Barclays in Brooklyn?
So definitely the one in Bridgeport, I feel like is a very unique case. I don't think I've in Connecticut. I mean, I may be misinformed, but I don't think there's been anything of that extent in Connecticut at all.
Mhm.
Um, so I kind of just put that in its own category.
Okay.
But the one in Fairfield compared to the one in the two that I went in Brooklyn,
Mhm.
definitely there was a difference in passion.
Mm.
Uh, the one in Fairfield felt like a lot of kids who had a need. Like I said, it was organized by teenagers, by high school students of Fairfield Ludlow and what's the other one? And Fairfield Ward.
Okay.
They put it together, and a lot of people. It was a really nice turnout. A lot of people showed up, but it was like the passion behind it. They were coming from a place of we have to step up,
Mhm.
and but from Brooklyn, it was more of a rooted passion of more like we're tired of this.
Mhm.
We don't want to see this anymore.
Mhm.
Um, there was a lot of like speakers that were in both of the protests I went in Brooklyn,
Okay.
and there were people with who could actually break down personal experiences, but also they were advocates in their communities. So they also were explaining and trying to spread their influence because a lot of people have misguided they have misguided frustration and
Mhm.
they don't know what to do with it. And that's just the reality of things. There's some people that don't know what to do with the frustrations, hence the mayhem that happened,
Mhm.
and all the rioting. But regardless, like the people in Brooklyn, they really spoke from the heart because it was so in tune with their reality.
Mhm.
Um, and especially in the first one that I went to, which was in front of the Barclays, there was a lot of people who on the spot were just really speaking. There was spoken word happening like on the fly, like right there, and it just showed like the it showed the usage of not only just like personal experience but culture, and it was just very organic, and that when you think Brooklyn, like that's what you think,
Yeah.
it's one of the hearts of
City.
of the city of hip hop, of all these different things that have derived from the boroughs.
Yeah.
And it just felt I, I felt like when I came back from Brooklyn
Mhm.
into Connecticut, that's the energy that I had within me from just witnessing all and taking it all in.
Mhm.
And then I feel like that was one of the reasons why I ended up making the fundraiser that I told you about.
Yeah.
I saw the differences in passion, and not to say that they weren't passionate. It was just coming from different realms of reality.
Mhm.
One side was more like we need to step up. The other side was like we're tired, and I and everybody listening to all the speakers, you resonate with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Feel pain. You like it was just very powerful, very
Yeah.
very powerful. Not to take away from Fairfield, but it was the ones in Brooklyn very strongly impacted me and made me question myself and made me realize the type of person I am.
Mhm.
And yeah, so definitely just more potency,
Mhm.
I would say.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, I mean, I saw obviously like on the news on TV, and unfortunately, most of the coverage was on the riots and the looting. But I also saw some coverage just of the scale, especially in Brooklyn. Like, I think protests are still going on, and the last like video, like I think they use a helicopter camera, and they just showed like Brooklyn and just a huge crowds of people. And I think what you were saying about like the potency of the protests, like people's energies, right? Because NYPD, they're I mean, New York, huge city, and their police force has been criticized, and there's been scandal after scandal, in their police force. I think because especially in these major cities, because they're so major, and their police force has huge budgets and most of the money gets donated to them. I could see why you felt like the energy and the passion, because even though I wasn't able to see much of the interviews of people who were on the ground there, but I could definitely see that. And same thing like like Los Angeles PD, Atlanta PD, whew, it's like they did not give up even when people were protesting, which is really ironically sad, that even while people are protesting against police brutality, acts of police brutality are still going on. And it's like, do you not see that people are going to continue? Like, if you thought this was going to stop, it's not stopping, like you're kind of making it worse for yourself. We're seeing um, those two black men that were lynched in, well, people don't think it's a suicide by hanging. Some people are thinking it's a lynching because it's too convenient, and the police have lied before, and so have the FBI. So it just like really, all of this seems too connected, seems too obvious. So I find that really interesting going on.
One thing with going back to the energy of the protests, one thing that I did realize was also like the how sensitive that borderline of everything just escalating quickly. Like
Hmm.
it was a very thin line because there's so much passion and adrenaline
Hmm.
in the protests. Um, it, I find it very important for them to be organized well when you have that kind of energy because
Hmm.
from one moment to the next, the bubble could pop,
Yep.
and I could see that, and actually I witnessed it.
Hmm.
Um, just that tension building up, and then
Hmm.
if you add pride on either side, because I don't like violence in general, but on either side, whether it's a cop with certain pride or someone who's just overly frustrated,
Hmm.
um, as a protester, it could easily those as individuals, those things could clash.
Hmm.
Um, and so one thing I admired about the protest that I went to
Hmm.
was the resiliency and the organizers because they were aware of these things and they set the tone of what everybody was there to
Hmm.
do. They set the tone of they want this to be peaceful. They set the tone of this is just us trying to speak.
Yeah.
Um, the one in Barclays ended up uh, concluding with arrests because
Well,
police were trying to actively push spread the crowd.
mhm,
Eventually, that led to more physical altercations,
mhm,
um, and then a lot of people getting arrested. But the second one I went to was very much stayed peaceful for the most part. I believe there was one incident that um, it was a talk that led into a march, and there was like an altercation in the march process. But overall, it was very peaceful, and I think that was that showed the level of skill and the leaders that are putting together these protests because if you don't take those things into consideration, it can get chaotic very easily.
mhm,
And so I don't know. That was just something that from witnessing it in person,
mhm.
it was a very fine line. And again, I admire those people who put it together.
Yeah, I mean, I I actually did go to a protest. I only went to one so far, and it was in Princeton, New Jersey. I don't know if you know too much about Princeton. It's like a very affluent, universities right there, like mostly white.
I got a general
Neighborhood.
idea of it. I know.
Yeah, yeah, very probably much like Fairfield, Connecticut. Uh,
Mhm.
and
So,
that, yeah, and that. So I went with a friend, and this was less of a protest, more of a rally. We found out from the organizers of the rally that the Princeton PD would not give them a permit to march, and I found that kind of interesting. Um, I wonder if maybe they didn't give it to them because they thought, they didn't. Maybe they saw, how other cities were. It got violent and maybe they didn't want that time. But that's my assumption. I found that a bit odd, that they wouldn't give them a permit. But it was essentially a rally. Very, I would say it was more general, just more of, we're all coming together. And there were, because Princeton is very much a predominantly white and like affluent community, there were more white people at this rally, but the organizers of the rally were Black American. One of them is actually from Newark originally. So, which is a predominantly like Black city, and I think New Jersey's biggest city. Um,
It's Newark.
you've been in Newark?
Yeah.
The times. uh, but yeah, so like she organized the protest. Sorry, the rally, and yeah, it was very much like we're all coming together. She talked about voting, like how that's important. There was like a prayer at one point. There was a lot of singing, like dancing. I took a couple pictures and videos of the footage. A lot of people with like nice signs. Since they couldn't march on the streets, they decided to march around the park perimeter because that's where the rally was held. And then one thing I thought was really like just a nice solemn I guess, solemn demonstration that they did was for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, they told everyone to like take a knee and a moment of silence. And I thought that was really nice because it really put it into perspective how, I mean, the evilness of the act and how long, I mean, this man was suffering till he died, basically. I mean, you literally slowly drew the breath out of someone until they died. And I guess in abstract, you're like, oh, like 9 minutes isn't really that long. But if you think about someone pressing on your neck and knowing they're gonna die, and that sure be evil, So
When you live for that long, it's almost like you get put in that position, and
mhm,
you realize the inhumanity of it because you yourself are physically kneeling, and you're
mhm,
realizing this is a ridiculously amount of time to not care about someone.
and I mean, the person is moving around. They're like telling you they can't breathe, and you're like, you're fine. How would you be okay? It's like I think there's like a meme out there about why is it like anytime a brutality happens to anyone, but particularly people of color, and let's say there's like a dog also, okay, like the Amy Cooper situation, right? A lot of people were upset about how she basically was racist and profiled that black bird watcher, and then immediately switched her tone to be like, "Oh, I'm afraid for my life," and she was like holding her dog in such a violent way, and people were so focused on the dog. Like a lot of people were, mostly white people, were so focused on the dog. It's like not to say that dog wasn't important either. Like thank God he's not under her care anymore, but then I heard she actually got custody back, which is problematic. But the fact that people were more focused on a dog than like a human, huh?
No, I was just
Oh, sorry. The fact that people are more focused on a dog than like a human life just shows, especially with white people, like where their priorities are. And but I put that as a analogy because I know for a fact, like let's say it was this police officer was like strangle the dog to death. That would really cause uproar. I mean, PETA would be involved, like the Animal Rights Society. It'd definitely make national attention. Like people would be quick to be like, "Oh, we should go to jail." But for some reason, when it comes to a human being, there's always, well, maybe you shouldn't have done this, maybe you shouldn't have done that. Like you would never say that to a dog. So I really found that quite interesting.
yeah. My mom says this a lot.
Mhm,
It says it's crazy to her that people treat animals so much more nicer than humans.
mhm,
And I understand that to some people pets are like family members themselves, but what she's getting at is like the value of human life should be much more prioritized than that of animals,
mhm,
um because that's just how she was raised.
mhm,
For
mhm,
her, it's like it's almost like blasphemous for you to have so much love and care and attention to an animal, but then like why is it that people are more focused on that rather than like how this other human being is being treated? Like
mhm,
it's like there's something that's wrong there. Like maybe because of social media people are being desensitized to
mhm,
how people treat other people, and
mhm,
people accept that there's evil out there, maybe
Yeah.
there's too many people who think like that then are letting things happen or just kind of brushing things to the side. And I feel like that's where a lot of the so-called uh, self-claimed non-racists stand. They don't even realize that they're brushing things to the side because maybe they're just too desensitized to things. Maybe it's the media's fault. Maybe it's the internet's fault for the internet's still very new in our society
Mhm.
compared to history. And these are one of the responsibilities of media platforms to be aware of this impact that they have on people.
Mhm.
Like there's a lot of things that could contribute to that level of desensitization
Mhm.
and for me personally misplaced priorities.
What do you mean by misplaced priorities?
Being that because I'm like that. I believe that too. What my mom was saying before, I would value a human's life over an animal's life,
Mhm. Mhm.
like any day.
Yeah. Yeah.
In that sense, like misplaced priority, where you're caring more about a dog than an actual human being.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
crazy that we have to even address that.
Yeah. I know. I know. And not to say that dogs, aren't like. I mean,
Yeah, I
yeah.
don't take that
Yeah.
away too.
Yeah.
Like I know people value animals.
Mhm.
Me personally,
Mhm.
if it's a human or an animal,
Mhm.
all day.
Yeah. 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 I mean, we could treat, like we could treat each other a lot better. I feel like animals treat each other a lot better. I mean, besides the ones that are,
It's like
predators, yeah. But like for the most part, like they share, they like help each other. And we could use a lot of that. They don't say like, well, you don't have this skin color, you don't have this set of, I don't know, teeth or something like that. They will, but human beings, we'll create every other, category and box about a reason about why we can't help each other or why we can't see. And I think about your desensitization. What's that word? Desensitization. Whatever that word is. That word, that really long word. I agree with that. I was actually thinking about also in terms of how mass shootings, how we've become so desensitized to mass shootings. Like we've seen so many stories that I remember, back at UConn, because I know you're a fellow UConn alum.
Mhm.
Back at UConn, I remember, I think I had just heard about the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas high school shooting. I think that was on in February. It was on Valentine's Day. I
Mhm.
want to say like a year or two ago when that happened. And I remember, like after it happened, I was getting dinner with a friend, and we had left the dining hall, and we just kind of like almost like black humor. We were just like what if a school shooting just happened right now? Like we're about to walk on this bus,
Mhm.
and he was like, "Wait, isn't this is kind of sad? Like we should not be like terribly laughing at this." But it's crazy, like we've been so desensitized to mass shootings that it doesn't even like shock anyone anymore. The same thing with like when I see police killings, like I can't really, like, I'm so numb to it. I This George Floyd video that came out, I didn't even watch it. I don't even share the actual video because I'm like, you shouldn't have to see someone get the life drained out of them for you to understand that there's a problem, going on.
Mhm.
So that, I was like, I'm not going to share. I was like, I already know from the reports alone, I already know that this is something heinous and is a problem. But I do agree, we are desensitized to violence so much, that it's just like, okay, like you can almost joke about it, even though
Mhm.
it's not a joke.
Yeah, I feel that to the desensitization of violence is like, and excuse me, the jokes,
Hmm.
like, and you said you caught yourself doing it.
Hmm.
And I think this applies to a lot of other problems in society,
Mhm.
quality.
Mhm.
The jokes almost like masks the underlying problems. It makes it a little bit more okay.
Mhm.
Like, and you don't think about it in the beginning of your jokes, and I'm guilty of it too.
Mhm.
But the people on the other end, like, you wouldn't be doing those jokes if you were living that reality, if you were living that life.
Yeah.
So it's just like humor is such a interesting realm.
Mhm.
um and even like in mainstream media, it's there's a thin line between um comedians their field of work, and like what could make them get canceled too. But
Mhm.
uh, it's hard. It's really hard because people do like to laugh, but
Mhm.
when is it overboard? When do we realize that are those little interactions between us are are happening everywhere, and be pushing people to not realize what they should be concerned about. The more you
Yeah.
laugh at something, the more of a joke you take it as, literally.
Yeah. Like satirizing it can only go so far.
Hmm.
You still want to make sure that the message doesn't get lost. And I'm seeing that a lot though with like a couple of the late night comedians,
Hmm.
but especially with like Trevor Noah. I think he's done a pretty good job. He like he'll make jokes, but they're very well written, and the message is still clear. And he's also been doing like a lot of interviews with people in the movement, out of the movement, lawmakers, authors. So he's like kept it pretty straightforward.
And he has a talent for that. So he has a talent of not disregarding the situation. If anything, he sides with what his beliefs are.
Hmm.
That's what makes him so good, because people appreciate that reality. And not people who like are on the other side of it, and they can still laugh at what he said.
Yeah,
It's just, that's that good, you know.
yeah,
It's a talent of his, and he's been doing that for so long. Like,
he has, he
he
has.
is the shit. I'm sorry, like he's a clever man, very clever man.
He is, and I think it could be also because he was born in apartheid South Africa. He's biracial, so
Mhm.
he gets it. Like he really gets it. Even though he's not American, but I mean, if all of that is connected, so he really understands a bit about what it's like to be a black man, a biracial person, and racism as a system. So I think that's why, like, compared to all the other comedians, like he just gets it.
Yeah.
Mhm. So
No,
like, oh, go ahead, go ahead.
it wasn't really important. I was just gonna say, like, that's really what set him up when he started really blowing up. That's like that was his thing, because
Hmm.
he was an American.
Hmm.
He felt like he could really talk about American issues,
Hmm.
and that's kind of what put him on edge. I'm not really American, but like, this is really fucked up.
Yeah.
That's how
Yep, yep, yep.
it's
And
really,
yeah, he even like will ask questions with from his audience. He's like, I don't understand why you guys do this. I don't understand why you guys do that. Like this is clear common sense that this doesn't seem right. And I think even like I'm raised by like an immigrant parents, right? And I think that um, children of immigrant parents also kind of have that outlook too, especially if you're first generation American. Like you're born and raised here, so what this country is like, especially if you're black. But because of the cultural background that you have, being raised by an immigrant parent, you also have a different perspective of like how relations are. But I mean, I'm first generation American, so like I'm black anywhere I go, even besides my cultural background, and I'm very much understanding about racism, obviously, and the whole systematic part of it. But also because of my parents, I think about um, I wouldn't say racism, not in their countries, their home countries, but um, kind of like a global situation, like how it affects them, or
see
racism through economics. Huh?
You see,
Yeah.
you understand it in other settings besides just the U.S. So you see multiple sides of it, not just as like um, a country issue, but in a more global sense. So it's a universal problem that's happening.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because of
Yeah.
how, I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
you got that extra bit of knowledge with that.
Yeah, for sure. And so like have you had any conversations like about like race, police brutality with like your family or any friends? Like has anyone come up to you and asked, what
Um,
what to do?
with the main the conversations with family were mostly addressing what they saw in the news, and most of my conversations involve me trying to just get the right information to them, because one thing that one clear difference between just generations is that we don't take in the same amount of information as much. We don't take in the same amount of media. Like
Yeah.
when the whole rioting situation started, um, I was plugged into social media, just constantly trying to see what was going on. I was very invested, probably more than most people, but I was very invested. And but it was also because like I wanted to see what my parents had to say about it, and I know that I have a certain understanding of it
Mhm.
that they don't. That they just maybe they've already formulated an opinion of what they've seen, but I, I wanted to be that kind of to allow them to start questioning that, because I've seen other things, and if I could explain what I've seen to them,
Mhm.
then hopefully they could formulate new opinions off of the information that I gave them. Because one thing that I realized is that even my own parents, like they're not. My parents are not stupid. My parents are very intelligent, but
Yeah.
well, they base their um, opinions and perspectives off of what they see.
Mhm. Mhm.
If what they see are news channels that aren't giving the full story, then
Yeah.
it's not something they really forming their opinion about. They're not worried about things that aren't happening directly. My parents, they work, they got other things to do. They got the whole thing set up. They're working class people.
Yeah.
It's not their main concern to be educated, even though a lot of people are saying, we should get educated, but they're just not at that generation where they're not pending to those types of messages that are being told to everybody, especially those who want to get on board with the movement.
Mhm.
Um, so my conversations with them have been more pertaining to that, and trying to, pick their brains about that, and share what I've seen and what I've understood, and
Mhm.
what I've taken up the media. And then most of the no, all my personal conversations with friends have
Mhm.
gone that much more deeper, because these are people more around my age,
Yeah.
consume around the same amount of media,
Yeah.
or plug what's happening,
Mhm.
and therefore we go more in depth about it. My best friend, he's gay and black,
Okay.
so I one of the deepest conversations I had was with him,
Mhm.
because and it was more pertaining to microaggressions that even me as his best friend I've done, because I simply wasn't the I don't worry about the same things he worries about when
Mhm.
we go to places together.
Yeah.
And for so long that I saw it as a for me I saw it as a personality difference of, like, oh, I'm more just like relaxed, free spirited, and he's more like cautious, but like once he gets comfortable, he's like, he's himself.
Yeah.
It's like, but why? Why does he have that? I never questioned that. I just saw that. I was like, we're just naturally two different people. But
Mhm.
no, it's way too often that, and he's your color, like
Mhm.
he's darker,
Mhm.
not just like light skinned.
Mhm.
Um, and so he's been telling me for years and years and years, and we've had arguments about it in the past,
Mhm.
but there was just always like this block where I just always thought he was over exaggerating, or maybe just over worrying. But
Yeah.
it's because that over worrying is a regular for him, and that's not that's what I didn't realize.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because me being the skin color I am, that's not something I live by every day.
Mhm.
That's his regular, and to me, every time we did spend time together, you know, And we went to areas where maybe he felt unsafe. Like I never associated that with just like his regular and how he literally um, goes about things. And yeah, we talked about that disconnect, and I really just mostly in our conversation just listened to him because he had a lot of pent up frustration, rage, and like sadness, the whole 9 yards. That was a big one for me, and also with the fundraiser that I've been putting together, I had a lot of black friends. I I was talking to them about it just to kind of get their take on it,
Mhm.
and a lot of them same thing as my best friend, just talking about those microaggressions within friend groups.
Yeah.
Um, there's a lot of things that happen within friend groups of different colors that, it's just like they don't see that same thing. The same thing that
Yeah.
happens to my best friend
Mhm.
happens all the time in certain friend groups where, there may just be that one black friend in the group, or it's a mix, and you could see the difference. You could see the reoccurring pattern of that dynamic, and of certain friends just not realizing the types of worries that regularly happen to our black friends.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, that's I can't remember all the conversations, but that's generally how how my conversations have been going.
Yeah, I feel like I've kind of like just by you talking about like some of the conversations you've had, I realize I really haven't had that many conversations
Hmm.
that I would have liked to have with people who I call my friends.
Hmm.
Um, and not like a few people who are my friends who are non-black um, have reached out to me, but we've never really sat down and like had a deep conversation, about this because I feel like even if even when I explain or like talk about, oh, this seeing these protests and everything, like as much as I'm glad to see it, it's a lot on me because, every like to be reminded that we still, us as black people, whether across the diaspora, we are still fighting for just basic human rights and to just be accepted as regular human beings as everybody else who has flaws and all those types of things. And I feel like I haven't really had that type of conversation with those friends. And part of me wonders, would I even want to have the conversation because I feel like I'd be exhausted. Because how do you explain to someone who will never grow up like how you grow up, because of society, um, what it is that you have to deal with because I mean I don't I think maybe the one good thing about corona the one good thing about corona this year is that people, because most people had to be home, because of the pandemic, and they got a chance to see up front like just what black people, just a little bit of what black people have been complaining and talking about, and it's led to like larger conversations beyond police brutality. Like on my Instagram, like I've seen people who I'm acquaintances with, people who are I would call my friends, resharing posts about defund the police or justice for this person, justice for that person, or educate yourself on this. Like they're sharing a lot of stuff beyond police brutality, like more about systemic and racism and what it means. And but I haven't really seen those people contact me. But then I'm like, would that be ingenuous? Like, would maybe they might feel kind of uncomfortable or like awkward? Like, how do I approach you? Be like, hey, so like, I'll give you an example, right? So 2018, yeah, fall semester. It was my senior year, so fall semester 2018. I actually went to Germany for a study abroad trip. And so, Germany is obviously a mostly white country and they know their history, with Nazi Germany, all that type of stuff. I applaud them for, they don't have any Hitler statues. They don't have any, swastikas being on display. Like they literally are so embarrassed of that. Like no, they don't deal with that. But I remember I was taking a political,
Awesome.
huh? Go ahead.
No, I'm just kind of adding. I don't want to take away from what you're saying,
Oh, okay.
but they admitted they're wrong.
Yeah, they admitted they're wrong. You know, like they still teach about it, but they know they don't have to display it everywhere because it's not a history they're proud of. You know. And I remember a political science class I was taking, and we did some type of experiment. It had nothing to do with like racial bias or anything, but just some regular experiment or whatever. And I remember I was getting dinner with the people that were in my political experiment group. One guy was a German, like a German citizen. The other guy was from Luxembourg, but his like family's from Albania, I believe.
Hmm.
So I remember, we were sitting down, and I'm pretty sure there was like, even though I was in the US, like I heard about another mass shooting and like I think some other police brutality situation. And I don't remember which case it was, but I remember they, were sitting down. They were like, "Hey, Tama, can you tell me about racism like in America?" And I was like, "Whew, that's a question that would probably take a whole semester, maybe longer." I was like, I cannot like explain racism in the US. Like and I don't blame them because that is like Germany is a very mostly white country. I cannot, and America is such a different culture, different country. And so when they see these things like on the, international news, I'm sure they're like, well, what's going on over there? Like, what is going on over there? And I'm like, I told them, I was like, well, it's a systemic problem. It's literally, and it's also systematic. Like there's a certain way it's structured through our history, but I'm like, I can't, it's exhausting for me to even explain it because it affects me. I was like, if you read a couple articles, some books, like you could start there, but like I can't explain, racial discrimination and all that jazz. Like I can't do all that by myself. And I'm starting to think like maybe that's why some of the people who are my friends might not have reached out to me in that aspect because maybe they're like, can you imagine? It's exhausting, telling someone like this is what I go through, and you won't really ever be able to see it or experience it, but this is what's going on. But I think this pandemic got like people to really see because like you're sitting at home, you think it's a
It's
pandemic, like like people. Yeah, like we're already going through the stuff like, oh, people are still killing people like extrajudicially, like that's so messed up. And
like
it's yeah, it's like causing people to, like wake up and like think more about it and stuff like that. So I do, I guess, appreciate people, kind of starting to wake up. And hopefully after these protests, like it continues, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. That's one of the things I'm concerned about too. Is I've been seeing a decline in people's engagement with
Hmm.
the topic. It's you don't want people to go about their lives and things like that. But if if we don't do something about it now, especially
Hmm.
after that we had things,
Hmm.
um, may never happen because so many times people have been riled up. They're like, yeah,
Yeah.
we're right.
Hmm.
Um, that was another thing that with my friends that they were concerned about. A lot of my black friends were actually annoyed by people wanting to support Black Lives Matter. They're
Hmm.
genuinely over it because their level of trust
Hmm.
with people is so low. It's
Hmm.
like it's like they almost expected everyone to eventually just like they expect it to die out. They
Yeah.
expect,
Hmm.
yeah, okay, we'll see what you say a month from now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And have that attitude with them, and I just try to be as their friend, um, just a place where they can let out whatever they needed to let out,
Hmm.
um, because I cared, and I think it's important for those people who do care to show that they care.
Yeah.
It's important for those friends who, if they did care, and that's what I was actually going to say about your friends,
Hmm.
if they did care enough, then they would make themselves uncomfortable and ask you.
Hmm.
Um, because it's hard when you try to approach them with the question, but they don't really want to listen in the first place.
Mhm.
Like if they didn't engage the conversation, was that a conversation they really are up to listen to, especially because it's going to be a long one.
Mhm.
Like, and that's weird for you to do,
Mhm.
you know. And then it's like now you're just nagging at someone, and I get it because they say not a lot of people want to get uncomfortable, but like you have to have these uncomfortable
Mhm.
conversations,
Mhm.
and it's a lot for people to handle because me wanting the conversation with my best friend,
Mhm.
me even wanting it, and then on top of that, I was like, no, fuck this. I'm gonna see you in person. We're gonna have
Mhm.
this,
Mhm.
not just FaceTime. We FaceTime all the time. I was like, I'm gonna see you in person. Like me wanting it, even I got to a point of listening so much that even when I wanted it to start with, by the end I didn't want to hear anymore because it was just that much overwhelming. So I get why the way people who may not have been as like forward with like asking their friends, like
Mhm.
getting comfortable, but I feel like at least that's a step in terms of introducing these things to you. And
Yeah.
like, you know, you could always stop the conversation, you know, and then pick it up another day.
If there's any a time, for I think especially Black people, like for us to really evaluate like who our friends are, this is the time
Mhm.
because a friendship doesn't have to be sad all the time. That's too toxic, but it does have to be real. And if you're gonna have like friends from different cultures, different racial backgrounds than you've got to understand that not everyone is on an equal playing field. And don't say that, like, don't be fake woke, like, yeah, I support you, or like blah blah blah, but when it comes time to have like the real important conversations, you shy away. And I get it, like history is very scary to me, especially when you learn the the uncomfortable parts. Like there's this book I read called Lies My Teacher Told Me. Everything your American history textbook got wrong. I saw it at Barnes and Noble. It was at a bargain price. It was like $5. I was like, why not? Okay. I agree with some parts here. I don't agree with, but like for the most part, the book told me a lot that I didn't even really know. And
No, it's the unknown unknown. It's the
mhm,
don't even know you don't know.
like the
You introduced it.
yeah, it's the ugly parts, like in American history textbooks, they don't teach that. They teach history in a very linear way. Like, oh, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. But there's no context, there's no, like history's kind of scandalous. There's so many scandals, and that's kind of interesting, and it could be dark and it's painful, especially when, you learn about history that has been like, that's about you, and it's in such a violent way. And I think maybe that's part of the reason why, non-Black people do feel that way, because once they are confronted with, what their ancestors, it may not be their direct ancestors or the group of people that they belong to, once they realize how brutal, they have, like the brutality they have caused against another racial or cultural group or ethnic group, it probably makes them feel very guilty. It makes them feel very uncomfortable. But if we want to get anywhere, we have to address it. And, just like, you don't have to be an apologist, be like, I'm so sorry, blah, blah. Like, obviously, you didn't create the system. So you really can't be sorry. But what you can do is be like, okay, I acknowledge you. I empathize with you. This is what I'm going to do to educate myself and, educate the people around me, and, check myself, and just, get to know you better. And but it definitely is. Like my brother, he was actually telling me, he was like, this is a great time to be hired as a Black person right now, because every company is worried about racial sensitivity. They're all making these weird blanket statements. We apologize. We support you. Um, you
Call
know,
them out. And if they fire you, then like file against them.
they were like, this is racist. Like, and so they don't want, like, it's right now, it's not trendy to be racist, So like, everyone's getting checked, like boycott this company, boycott that company,
Yeah.
everyone's getting called out. And so, others like, hey, it's a great time to be Black right now. Like, in terms of, everyone doesn't want to seem like a racist, but because they're getting called out, like banned and stuff like that. So use it to your advantage.
Yeah, actually, and getting into that, like that cancel culture, it at times I feel like it's ruthless, but like it's also very much needed. People need to feel like now it's like it's like you said, it's trendy to not be racist, but now it should be feared to be sorry, it's trendy to be right? It's trendy to not be racist, but it should really be feared.
Yeah.
Like, I would rather have people fear to be a racist. People should be disgusted by it. If anything, that's a better version of fearing it. They should be personally disgusted by it. And so it's like, but that cancel culture sets the tone for things like that. It makes it okay. It drills it into people's head to think twice about that thing you're about to post because you will get canceled. Me, when I was starting my fundraiser, that was the biggest worry on my mind because I was like, if I'm gonna do a Black Lives Matter fundraiser towards something that I feel like is a really good way to slowly start to attack systematic racism, especially systemic racism, especially in like the education field. I need to do this right.
Yeah.
I need to talk to all my Black friends about it, see how they feel, see their take, their perspective. Because that's apparently with my conversation with my own best friend, I didn't have that perspective.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, so now it's like I need to get as many eyes on deck, as many views on this to make sure that I'm not overlooking something that I've grown up with. Because again, I looked over microaggressing my own best friend. But that cancel culture is a powerful tool because it starts to implement that into society. And it sets the tone for people and how they go about a certain thing. It makes them think twice whether they're going to do something. One thing that I was on the fence about specifically was when I saw the video, the men that allowed what's his name? Derek
Oh, the officer?
officer Derek to
Yeah, Derek Chauvin,
to kill George Floyd. I looked at it very I looked at it in a rational sense where I thought perhaps those people didn't have enough authority to feel like they can question a higher up. Like I thought of whatever reason we could give them to think that they're not racist. I try to give them the benefit of the doubt in that sense because even back to what I was saying, where that could just be another person who wanted a good job. They wanted to become a police officer, get a nice federal check. They're just trying to make a living. They don't want to go break their own rules, but like it's still like they're so influenced by whatever work structure that they're in that like those people just let it happen.
Yeah, yeah.
Co-workers, the other people who are keeping the bystanders away, thwarting them, they let it happen. So I really had no sympathy, even though I gave them the benefit of the doubt of potentially why, they let it happen. But these are the cases that you have to treat and that you have to treat I'm sorry, I'm getting riled up. You have to make an example out of these situations. Whether the guys around there didn't want to happen, whether they were really racist or not, whether they're just trying to do their job, those cases set the example, especially because it's broadcasted everywhere. They should all be in jail. They should all lose their jobs because if they don't, it's going to set the tone and make it seem like they could get away with it another time. It has to be, the example has to be set. That's what happens with cancel culture. That's what should happen with those cases.
But yeah, like American police culture is very different compared to other countries' police cultures in that, you could become a cop so quickly. They don't have a lot of training at all for de-escalation or educate. Like you could have a high school diploma and become a police officer. You don't necessarily, you should at least have at most like a bachelor's or an associate's degree in like criminal justice or sociology or psychology, like things.
Yeah, like give them some sociology courses, like police.
Exactly, like the basic things, and you shouldn't, and there should be, a tougher screening process to decipher who should be allowed to carry a lethal weapon. I mean, it should be ingrained into every, in the police academy that look like you are going to have a license to carry this weapon. And sometimes you may need to use it for certain heightened situations, but you can't be using it just willy nilly. If you are looking for a power trip, don't even bother coming to the police academy because we're not here for that. What I was going to connect it to was police unions. We don't even have that many unions in America as it is. Like, I want to say after the 80s, especially, like, unions in this country were broken up, and like we've increased in like capitalism, favoring, the whole pulling yourself up by the bootstraps myth, the American dream myth, and not focusing on what the purpose of unions was, to protect workers against, like, a bad corporate behavior. But police unions, they are literally on a completely different scale. I mean, they've allowed to rise to the level of power that judges and prosecutors and, anyone that is in charge of holding the law, mayors, governors, the president even, they are afraid to challenge the police union and say, look, you can't, buy the officer, in your unions, like, freedom. You can't, I'm not gonna lie, to have your own lawyers and, get your officers off the hook for committing gross abuses of power. So I think, the conversation also needs to, like, put more pressure on that. Like, it's not even just defunding the police, but that would also mean, lessening the strength of the police unions, because it's because of them that they're able to get away every single time there's like an abuse of power, and that, like, I heard that one of the officers, in involved in the George Floyd killing, he apparently was a rookie cop. He was like the youngest of them. I don't think he was the one sitting on his back. I don't know if he was like standing somewhere, something like that. But they let him out on bail. And I believe they said the Minneapolis Police Union like paid for his bail. And people were like, "Why is he out on bail?" But they were like, he was a bystander. He was on his fourth day or something, like, on the job. And it's like, I get it, but that's not an excuse. But that's exactly what the police culture is. They're Dave Chappelle. If you, I don't know if you know, he came out with a comedy special, right?
On
Um,
this map.
yeah, like a very quick one. Like, it was literally, it was like a 20 something minute special, like, on the fly. He was like, everyone keeps on asking me what I think. It's on YouTube. It was like, everyone keeps asking me what I think. So these are my thoughts. And he titled it 8 minutes, 46 seconds. And one of the stuff he talks about, he's like, we've seen this before. Like, there have been cases out of police officers who have spoken out or have, like, in public, or have reported to superior when they see a fellow officer clearly abusing, power and a complete power trip and all that kind of stuff, and they'll get fired, or they'll get, like, demoted, like, put on, like, a lesser job, or, they'll slowly get, like, blackballed and it's like, that's not a culture that's good. It's very toxic,
Yeah. But then it
That's
doesn't allow people to speak out on the matters that they feel like they can speak out. They have no say. They're
Mhm.
just, they're enforced to abide.
Yeah, yeah,
And that's so toxic. People just gonna. It's a fear tactic.
mhm, mhm.
And it's implementing that in a systematic way. It's put together, and it's a very negative culture, and and that ties to what I was saying too about um, you know he may not have wanted that to happen,
Mhm,
but what made him not do the human thing?
mhm.
What rules, regulations was he under,
Yeah,
or job pressures was he under that didn't allow him to do that?
mhm.
So it's and I know a lot of people don't just blame it on the individual cops,
Mhm.
but it really is like a structural issue. Because if you're telling me that, because I actually didn't know about that, about the police unions, and that they allow things like that to happen. Like that is just, it's like it becomes more obvious
Yeah,
when you find things out.
yeah. And just like quickly, and that point, like, that's why, the slogan. When I saw ACAB for the first time, I was like, "What the heck is ACAB?" And they're like, "It means all cops are bastards." And I was like, "Oh, okay." Or, how people were like, "There's no good cops," and I was like, and, some people are saying, well, there are some good cops out there. They need to, and, the whole bad apples thing. But then you realize, like, how can there be How could there be good cops if they like the real good cops are probably police officers who aren't in the police force anymore because they know there's a code of silence that if they speak out they will get reprimanded. So there's no such thing really as good cops because they will get reprimanded if they speak out and they realize that the culture is so toxic, so they leave. They're like, I can't work in this space, like I want to actually help my community, but it's pointless because things just get
I,
so.
I didn't have my peace of mind. They don't have their peace of mind. They can't even speak out rightfully on the matters that they feel like they can.
Mhm.
So you're right. Yeah, probably a lot of cops, the best cops, probably want that quick retirement, just get in and out,
Mhm. Mhm.
which does happen a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah. Oh, all right.
Yeah,
This has been
it's
good though. It's been
it
awesome.
is. I'm
Like,
glad you got me on board for this.
I'm glad you agreed, like I'm glad to have these types of conversations with people, especially when it's not like quick sound bites where someone's, on the street like, so what do you think? And yeah, like I like having, I thrive better this way.
I feel you on that. I'm the same. I like to, and again, with my own friends, I like to throw these things out there.
Mhm.
Say what you gotta say what feels right.
Mhm.
Make it okay for us to call each other out on things or disagree. Um, yeah, agree to disagree because that's where you know we could start understanding more.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and if you need any help with promotion or anything of these videos, I remember when we got on the phone the first time.
Mhm.
uh, I was telling you, I was like, if we're gonna do something like this, you really gotta the same effort you put into making it, you gotta put it into like getting it out there because like these are the types of conversations people need to hear because like you said, you could even have them with certain friends.
Mhm.
Like look at you, you're having these conversations with strangers.
Mhm. Mhm.
I can't friends have these conversations.
Exactly. Yeah.
Very message. And I'm glad that you reached out to me. I don't even know how you got in contact with me, but I'm glad you got in contact with me.
I think like so I posted like multiple times a day, like multiple days on my
Oh, a
Instagram.
my friend.
Why don't would I know your friend?
Um she recommended me to reach out, and then that's how I got a hold of that. I reached out to you, I think.
Yes, you did. You did.
Okay, that's what it was. Yeah, she saw what I was doing. She was like, my friend's been like posting this, and I think you should check it out. And I was like, okay. And I think that's why I messaged you.
Excellent.
But yeah, I do have to get going.
All right, no problem.
Um, we conclude this in any formal way.
Um, let's see. I guess like a quick thank you, again for talking with me. Like this was a really I'd even asked a lot of questions. Like I liked how this like just flowed, like it started with like one question but like built off of each other. So thank you for taking your time out of your day to like speak with me and hopefully like I'll share this as much as I can. Like I have a YouTube channel, so like I'll put it there, all my social media, like I told my friends to share it. If you can too, and hopefully we start building a bigger conversation.
Yeah, and hopefully, I don't know. I like to see what other people have to say too, because I know you are reaching out to other people. So I'm actually like excited to see what you talk about with other people.
Me too. All right.
Well, it was a pleasure. I
Yes.
shall hear from you whenever you reach out, and whenever you have those videos to share, let me know.
All right. No problem. Thank you again. You have a great rest of your day.
So much. Have a good one.
Okay. Bye.